Hospitals profit more when you stay sick, not when you heal. That's why grandma's tea gets mocked, while Big Pharma sells the same plant in a $5,000 pill. Welcome. Let me show you what really happened. The skyline of Manhattan glittered like diamonds scattered across black velvet. At the very top of Langford Tower, a private, fortress-like medical suite reserved for the elite, Victor Langford lay staring at the ceiling, a silent war raging behind his pale, glassy eyes. Victor Langford, 72, wasn't just rich. He was empire-rich. Oil, pharma, tech real estate. His name was attached to skyscrapers, hospitals, and universities across the globe. A man who once walked into boardrooms and watched grown men stand before he even spoke. But tonight, he was barely breathing. The monitors beeped at a dull rhythm beside his bed, echoing like a slow funeral march. Tubes ran from his frail body to machines that hummed with artificial life. His once coal-black hair had surrendered to streaks of silver, and his skin clung too tightly to bones that had once intimidated presidents and prime ministers. A circle of men in white coats stood at a distance, murmuring in clinical tones. Harvard-trained, world-renowned, the best that billions could buy. But they all wore the same expression, the kind doctors wear when hope has left the room hours ago, but protocol demands they linger a little longer. End-stage neurodegenerative progression, one whispered. Motor decline is irreversible. We've optimized everything. He's unresponsive to all known treatment. A second voice chimed in, lowering his tone like the billionaire could still crush his career with a flick of the finger. Frankly, it's a miracle he's lasted this long. One of them glanced over his shoulder. A priest stood silently by the exit, holding a small Bible and a silver cross tucked discreetly into his coat. No one said it out loud, but they all knew why he was here. 2 floors below, the elevator dinged. Danielle Brooks stepped out, her scrubs fresh, her ID badge clipped neatly to her chest. The night shift. Again. She adjusted her knotted curls into a tighter bun as she walked through the dimly lit hallway that smelled faintly of antiseptic and resignation. At 32, Danielle had learned how to be tough and relentless. Growing up in the Bronx, raised by her grandmother, Mama Grace, she knew what it meant to move through systems that were never built with people like her in mind. But invisibility was power. It let her listen when people assumed she wasn't in the room. It let her study when no one thought she was watching. And Danielle watched everything. As she passed a station of murmuring nurses glued to their phones and vending machine coffee, one of them glanced up. "Langford's still hanging on," the woman said. "Barely." Danielle offered a polite smile and kept walking. She'd been assigned to Langford's floor for 4 months. Most of the staff treated it like a punishment, an old, rich, bitter man slowly falling apart in a cage of gold. But Danielle, she paid attention. To the way his pupils reacted when the blinds opened. To the reflex in his hands when the wrong sedative was administered. To the slight twitch in his lips when classical music played near the window. He wasn't gone. Not yet. In her pocket, she carried a worn leather notebook. Inside it were scribbles, sketches, ancestral remedies from Mama Grace, some written in her dialect, some in her own shorthand. Techniques modern medicine had dismissed long ago. Herbs, pressure points, chants, oils. She hadn't used any of them. Yet, the private suite was quiet when she entered. Victor lay in the dim light, a shadow of the man she had studied from headlines and whispered hospital gossip. But even broken, he looked like a man who didn't know how to surrender. She pulled out her chart, scanned the vitals. They were worse than yesterday. "Good evening, Mr. Langford," she said gently, brushing a strand of hair off his damp forehead. His eyes flickered. Not open, not awake, but alive. Somewhere, deep in the fog, she knew he heard her. She checked his dosage, adjusted the 4, and lowered the blinds slightly. Then, with a quiet sigh, she sat. No one asked her opinion. No one ever did. But she knew something. She had been seeing something, patterns no one else saw, changes no one bothered to notice. It wasn't arrogance. It was instinct. She looked at him one last time before leaving the room, then whispered beneath her breath, "You're not dying yet. Not if I have anything to do with it." The night was unusually quiet. No buzz of overhead paging, no shuffle of nurses switching shifts. Just the faint hum of machines and the city lights blinking beyond the 60th floor windows. Danielle walked into Victor Langford's suite for what should have been a routine check. But tonight, something was different. His eyes were open, for the first time in weeks. She paused, clipboard still in hand. He wasn't just awake. He was watching her. Not with fear or gratitude, with suspicion. That sharp, business world glint, the one that had brokered multi-billion-dollar deals and ruined CEOs in under an hour, was back. So, he rasped, his voice thin but biting. They still send you in at night, huh? Danielle blinked, recovering. I'm on the rotation. Victor gave a weak, sardonic chuckle. You're the quiet one. The only one who doesn't tiptoe around me like I'm already a ghost. Danielle set the clipboard down. You're not a ghost, Mr. Langford. He looked at her, his breathing shallow. That's not what the others think. I can see it in their eyes. They've already buried me in a golden casket. She hesitated, then pulled a chair beside the bed. For a moment, the room felt suspended in time. Two people from completely different worlds, drawn together by something nobody else could see. You're not dying because of your illness, she said finally. You're dying because they've stopped treating you like a person. He narrowed his eyes. They're following charts and protocols and giving up because you don't fit the model, she continued. But I see something else. Your body's still fighting. You're still fighting. You just need someone who'll fight with you. Victor studied her. That icy skepticism still lingered, but there was something else now too, curiosity. Tell me, nurse, he muttered, what makes you think you can save me when the best doctors in the world have already failed? She didn't flinch. I don't think, she said calmly. I know. For a long moment, there was silence. Then Victor laughed, actually laughed. Not the full-bodied kind he used to let rip in the boardroom, but a jagged little cough that still carried bite. You've got nerve, he said, shaking his head. I used to like that in people, before they all started kissing my feet for a paycheck. She didn't smile. She just waited. Victor's eyes twinkled, dangerously. All right then, let's make it interesting. Danielle tilted her head, unsure what he meant. If you can keep me alive, truly alive, for 30 more days, he leaned in slightly, voice hushed and raspy. I'll give you $1 million. Her face stayed perfectly still. No shock, no gasp, just a slight tightening of her jaw. She stepped closer, leaned in, and replied, put it in writing. Victor's lips curled. Done. By morning, word spread like wildfire. The billionaire's personal lawyer, an icy, pinstripe-suited man named Grayson, arrived with a leather briefcase and a poker face. A few witnesses, a notary, and 2 pages of legal formality later, the agreement was signed. $1 million, payable if Danielle Brooks keeps Victor Langford alive for 30 consecutive days, ending at midnight, 30 days from the agreement's timestamp. When she signed her name, some of the staff watching actually laughed out loud. She's lost her damn mind, a resident whispered to a colleague as they passed in the hallway. This isn't Grey's Anatomy. What's she gonna do, pray him better? By lunchtime, she had a new nickname, the Witch Nurse. She heard it whispered behind her in the break room. Read it scrawled on a post-it note left near her locker. Some of the doctors began treating her like a problem, others like a joke. One even went as far as saying to her face, you know he's dying, right? What's your plan, snake oil and fairy tales? Danielle said nothing. Let them laugh. She didn't take the dare because she needed the money, though God knew she could use it. Student loans, rent, her grandmother's care back home in the Bronx, $1 million could flip her world upside down. But that wasn't why she said yes. She said yes because she knew, deep in her gut, deep in her bones, that there was still a pulse of life in that man that no one else could see. And now, she had 30 days to prove it. The morning after the contract was signed, Danielle arrived on the top floor with a quiet intensity in her step and a canvas tote bag slung over her shoulder. Not regulation, but no one questioned her. Not yet. Inside that tote were glass vials wrapped in linen cloth, a metal bowl carved with markings older than the hospital itself, and a handwritten journal filled with notes passed down by her grandmother, pages worn and stained with time. To anyone else, it looked like folklore. To Danielle, it was a lifeline. She stepped into Victor's suite and closed the door behind her. The curtains were drawn, the room bathed in soft, filtered sunlight. Good morning, she said softly. Victor opened one eye, still half groggy from the night's medication. You're back, he rasped. I was starting to think that contracts scared you off. I don't scare easy, she said, setting her bag down. Today we begin. The transformation started small. The first thing she changed was his light exposure. She adjusted the room's blinds so that sunlight hit his skin in calculated doses, based on the circadian rhythm techniques she'd read about in both modern journals and tribal medicine scrolls. She replaced his protein shakes with broth made from herbs she simmered herself, after hours, in her tiny Bronx apartment. No preservatives. No artificial anything. Then came the injections, microscopic doses of ancestral African medicine, drawn from crushed roots and bark that weren't even legal to name in the hospital's records. Danielle administered them precisely and without error, always behind closed doors. Always late at night. She added sound therapy. Low-frequency pulses played from her phone that mimicked the vibrational chants her grandmother once used during healing ceremonies. During the day, she guided him through slow, controlled breathing rituals, helping oxygenate his failing lungs and quiet his mind. And at night, when the floor went silent and the rest of the staff believed she was just checking vitals, Danielle would light a small, scentless bomb from a carved tin box, place it on the floor, and begin softly whispering incantations in her native tongue. Not spells. Not magic. Memory. Medicine. Ritual. But hospitals are filled with eyes. Security cameras caught glimpses. Danielle crouched low to the ground beside his bed, murmuring things they couldn't hear. Glowing bowls. Strange vials. Her fingertips pressed gently on pressure points the doctors had long abandoned as irrelevant. The footage made it to the nurse's lounge within 2 days. "Yo, she's chanting over him now," one nurse said with wide eyes, pausing the grainy video. "She's injecting what?" Another whispered. "That's not standard protocol." By the end of the week, whispers turned to gossip. Gossip turned to fear. Some said she was poisoning him slowly for the payout. Others claimed she had hypnotized him, that he wasn't really awake, that she was playing puppet master with a half-dead billionaire. A formal complaint was filed anonymously. Suspicious nighttime behavior involving non-approved medical substances and possible psychological manipulation of a vulnerable patient. But while the staff whispered, something strange began happening. Victor Langford started changing. It began with his voice. One morning, instead of rasping, he cleared his throat and said, "Coffee. Real coffee. None of that diet sludge." Danielle was shocked. "Excuse me. You heard me. Give me a cup before the interns find out I'm still breathing." She smiled, but said nothing. A few days later, he was sleeping through the night. The tremors in his hands slowed. His breathing, once erratic, was calm. The private physician assigned to his case, a man who had already drafted a DNR, was stunned. "I don't know what she's doing," he said quietly to Victor's daughter during a phone call, "but something weird is happening, and it's working." When approached by a skeptical supervising nurse, Danielle remained calm. "Everything I'm doing is within my rights as his private caregiver," she said evenly. "If there's a problem, I suggest you speak to Mr. Langford's legal team. He's fully lucid and under no sedation." That shut things down, for the moment. Victor, for his part, never asked what was in the injections. Or the tea. Or the sound waves. He didn't want to know. For the first time in months, he felt something he hadn't felt since the diagnosis. Hope. Not the kind sold in pill bottles. Real hope. The kind that sneaks up on you and makes you scared to breathe too deeply in case it vanishes. Each time Danielle entered the room now, he watched her the way a man watches a flickering candle in a dark cave. She didn't need his belief. She just needed time. And if the others wanted to call her a witch, so be it. Witches, after all, had kept people alive long before hospitals ever existed. The transformation was no longer subtle. Victor Langford, once the dying billionaire, now walked with measured confidence down the gleaming hallways of the private hospital wing. His steps were slow but steady, like a man pulling himself out of the grave 1 foot at a time. And Danielle Brooks? She moved silently behind him like a shadow with purpose. At first, the staff thought it was a fluke, maybe a last burst of life before death. But when Victor sat up in a boardroom meeting with his advisors and began barking sharp, lucid instructions, people started to whisper. Then one night, Danielle received a simple message on her hospital pager. "Come to the 45th floor." Alone. The elevator ride was quiet, tense. She hadn't been this high in the building before. It was reserved for VVIP clients and hush-hush board dealings. Victor's office looked more like a command center than a recovery suite. Dark walnut bookshelves, gold fixtures, art that could pay off the national debt. He sat at his desk, a charcoal cashmere blanket draped over his shoulders, reading something with furrowed intensity. "You asked to see me?" Danielle said, cautious. Victor didn't look up right away. Then, slowly, he placed the folder down and gestured to the seat across from him. "I've built empires," he said quietly, eyes sharp. "Made $1 billion before breakfast and lost 2 more before dinner. But I've never felt what I feel right now." She tilted her head. "And what's that?" "Hope," he said. "A strange, painful, intoxicating thing." He leaned back. "Danielle, if I make it to 90 days, I want you to run something for me. A new biotech firm. Just science, real science, born from whatever miracle you put into my veins." She was shocked. "What do you mean run it?" She said. "I want you to co-own it." 49%, he said, sliding over the folder. Danielle opened it and saw the draft papers. Her name already printed beside his. "I don't understand," she whispered. "Why me?" He studied her, his gaze sober. "Because I built empires with sharks. I want my next one with someone who actually saved my life." Her hands trembled slightly as she closed the folder. "You know the backlash will be insane, right? I've survived 5 corporate takedowns, 2 assassination attempts, and a yacht explosion. Let them come." But the backlash was quicker and more vicious than even Victor anticipated. Gossip in the hospital turned into shouting behind closed doors. The Harvard-trained medical team, led by Dr. Spencer Gray, called an emergency review board. They accused Danielle of manipulating an ailing man for financial gain. Said her methods were witchcraft dressed up as wellness. Then it went public. Dr. Gray appeared on Morning Line News with the headline, "Top Doctor Claims Nurse Exploited Dying Billionaire." On national TV, he spat. "It's disgraceful. She's using folk rituals and old wives' tales. And now she's set to inherit a stake in a company? This isn't medicine. It's manipulation." The anchor leaned forward. "Are you saying she's a fraud?" "I'm saying she should be investigated. Immediately." "Danielle?" She said nothing. No interviews. No statements. Not even to her closest friends. Victor tried to shield her. "Let the jackals howl," he said. "They'll choke on their own venom." But pressure has a way of seeping into cracks, even those made of steel. One morning, Danielle arrived for her shift like always. Swiped her badge. Red light. She tried again. Access denied. Confused, she went to the front desk. The administrator looked uncomfortable. "There's been a directive. Your access is temporarily suspended pending investigation." "No one told me." "I'm sorry, Danielle. I really am." She stood frozen in the sterile hallway, her scrubs catching the morning light. Victor's private suite was now behind 2 locked security doors. Armed guards flanked the entrance. As she turned to leave, nurses and staff watched from behind their monitors. Some looked away. A few smirked. But one janitor, an old man with tired eyes, whispered as she passed, "They're scared, Miss Danielle. That's why they're fighting you." She didn't reply. She just walked to the elevator, slowly, with the grace of a woman who had already decided. It started with a single frame. Blurry. Night vision green CCTV recording. The clip opened with Danielle kneeling at Victor's bedside, eyes closed, whispering something indecipherable. Candles flickered around them. A bowl of herbs steamed near his feet. Her hands hovered in slow, deliberate circles over his chest. Then, someone edited in eerie music. Slowed it down. Zoomed in. Added the caption, "This is what's been keeping a billionaire alive." By morning it was everywhere. TikTok, Twitter, #NurseOrWitch trended in the States. On daytime TV, pundits tore into it like raw meat. Is she a fraud or a miracle worker? One anchor spat into the camera. "Let's call this what it is, manipulation. Elder abuse. Witchcraft dressed as wellness." Others came to her defense. "She's being criminalized for healing in a way the system doesn't understand," one black physician said during a live stream. "This is how systemic bias works. They praise results when they come from Harvard, but call it voodoo when it comes from the Bronx." Danielle didn't speak. She couldn't. Her phone had 423 unread messages. Her license was under emergency review by the state board. Paparazzi were camped outside her apartment in the South Bronx. One even chased her into a bodega and snapped a picture of her crying in the corner. Then came the lawsuit. Victor's 2 sons and his icy daughter appeared outside a courthouse, flanked by lawyers in $1,000 suits. The eldest, Bryce Langford, adjusted his cufflinks before facing the press. We believe Ms. Danielle Brooks used manipulative and unproven practices to influence our father, he said coldly. We are seeking immediate injunction against the biotech transfer and any financial commitments made under duress. Are you suggesting she performed voodoo? A reporter called out. We're saying she exploited an old man desperate to live. And now she wants half of our family's legacy. The press went wild with different headlines. Witch nurse or wellness fraud? Langford kids say dad fell for nurses, African magic. $1 million deal or blackmail. Shocking twist in billionaire's miracle case. Danielle sat in her mother's apartment that night, curled up in a borrowed hoodie, watching her own name scroll across the bottom of every news channel like a curse. Her savings were gone, tied up in legal defense fees and a mounting defense she couldn't afford. Every hospital had blacklisted her. Her nursing license was suspended indefinitely. Friends stopped answering her calls. Even some family members quietly distanced themselves. And still, she said nothing. She waited. Because somewhere in a high-rise above all the noise, Victor Langford was still alive. And then, 12 days later, he did what no one expected. He stood on live TV. A press conference was called at Langford Holdings' marble lobby downtown. Cameras filled the atrium. Reporters packed the balconies. No one knew what to expect. The doors parted. Victor Langford walked out, slowly, yes, but tall, steady, unmistakably alive. Not in a wheelchair. Not gasping or shaking. He wore a dark navy suit, no tie, and carried no cane. His skin had color. His eyes had fire. And behind him, his lawyer held a folder. The crowd erupted. He raised his hand. Thank you for coming, he said, voice gravelly but strong. 6 weeks ago, I was preparing to die. My doctors told me there was no hope. They said my organs were failing, that I wouldn't make it to Christmas. He paused. Then I met Danielle Brooks. Gasps rippled through the audience. She didn't just treat me, he said. She saw me, not as a dying man, not as a bank account, but as someone worth fighting for. And against all odds, she healed me, not with potions or promises, but with conviction, intelligence, and a kind of courage I haven't seen since the men I built empires with. A journalist shouted, "What about the lawsuit from your kids?" He smiled. They're not getting a cent. And if they want to see a real fortune built, they'll have to earn it, working under her. Murmurs exploded. My will is updated. The biotech deal stands. Ms. Danielle Brooks owns 49% of my newest company. And to the media, to the licensing board, and to every doctor who laughed at her, I hope you're watching this. Because your 6 weeks are up. The room fell silent. And then applause broke out, scattered at first, then thunderous. Back in the Bronx, Danielle clutched the edge of her seat, eyes full of tears. Not because she was vindicated, but because someone finally said it out loud. She mattered. 60 days later, Victor Langford's assistant called for another round of press conference. The cameras flashed like lightning. Journalists jostled for position in the gilded marble hall of the Langford estate, expecting an obituary announcement or a formal statement from the lawyers. But what they got instead was something no one in the room, no one in the world, could have scripted. The grand double doors opened slowly, deliberately, and in walked Victor Langford, standing tall, unaided, and sharper than he'd looked in a decade. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. His suit was custom Tom Ford. His gait had a quiet power, like a man who had fought death and come back with a vengeance. People blinked, whispered, grabbed their phones. This couldn't be the same man who, just 60 days ago, had been written off by America's top neurologists. Victor stood behind the podium, removed his gold-rimmed glasses, and scanned the room with ice-blue eyes that had once closed for what doctors thought would be the last time. I know what you're all thinking, he began, his voice gravelly yet commanding. No, this isn't a pre-recorded hologram. I'm alive. Very much so. A few nervous chuckles scattered through the press pit. I'm here today not because of traditional medicine, he continued. Not because of Harvard. Not because of the dozen specialists who told me to prepare for a dignified goodbye. I'm here because one woman decided to see me, not just my diagnosis. A screen behind him lit up, displaying medical scans in side-by-side comparison. The crowd squinted, then gasped. The before and after images were indisputable. Degenerative damage had reversed, inflammation had receded, and neural connectivity had dramatically improved. These are my official scans, Confirmed by 3 independent labs, Victor said. Doctors told me I had 30 days to live. That was 62 days ago. Now I sleep through the night. I walk. I remember everything. I feel reborn. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. And because I believe in accountability, he added, I want to share what I've done since waking up on the other side of death's door. He reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out a folded sheet of paper, and held it up. This is a copy of the trust one created 2 days ago, he said. It contains a $100 million transfer to one Danielle Brooks, the woman you've all seen dragged across headlines like she's some back-alley charlatan. That money is hers. Not for charity. Not for show. It's for saving my damn life. The room erupted into murmurs. Reporters furiously typed, phones buzzed, cameras zoomed. And that's not all, Victor continued, voice rising. Langford Biohealers, a company originally meant to be my legacy project, now has a new majority owner. As of this morning, Danielle Brooks holds 51% of the shares. Yes, she's the boss now. He smiled, eyes glinting with a mix of defiance and pride. She's already begun working with researchers from MIT, South Africa, China, and Tokyo to begin clinical trials on the very treatments she used on me. Not magic. Not voodoo. Integrative healing rooted in centuries of African knowledge. Something our Western egos wrote off far too long. Victor stepped back, then leaned in again for one final blow. I've made billions in my life, he said. Harvard taught me how to make money. Danielle taught me how to stay alive long enough to spend it. The crowd went silent. A few clapped. Then more. Within seconds, the hall exploded in applause. Online, the speech went viral in under an hour. Headlines flipped from "Which Nurse Scandal" to "Billionaire's Miracle Nurse Vindicated in Shocking Press Conference." Victor Langford's stunning act of gratitude. Meet the African-American nurse who now owns a $900 million biotech firm. Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok blew up. Celebrities tweeted support. Billionaires reached out for private consultations. Meanwhile, Victor's children, who had sued Danielle for voodoo manipulation, were nowhere to be found. Back in her small apartment, Danielle sat cross-legged on the floor, laptop open, eyes wide as she watched the speech live-streamed by CNN. She didn't cry. She just smiled. But because for the first time in her life, the world finally saw what her grandmother had always told her. Real medicine doesn't just heal the body. It brings the soul back to life. And now, that soul had an empire. The morning after Victor's press conference, the media landscape looks like a flipped chessboard. All night long, headlines change. CNN calls her the healer who made a billionaire stand. BBC's anchor opens with, "Is the future of medicine ancient?" Al Jazeera runs a full profile titled "Africa's Answer to Big Pharma." Clips from the leaked ritual video that once labeled her a scam now go viral again, but this time with admiration. Someone overlays it with gospel music and captions it, "When healing is in your blood." Hashtags trend by the hour. Hashtag trust black women. Hashtag Danielle effect. Hashtag the real medicine. Danielle, still processing everything, sits quietly on her apartment balcony in Harlem, in a silk robe, sipping hibiscus tea. Her phone buzzes nonstop, interview requests, brand offers, clinic partnerships. Oprah's team wants to fly her out. Elon Musk tweets, "She healed a billionaire with herbs. Maybe she can fix Twitter too." Harvard's walls shake, not from an earthquake, but from public pressure. Investigative journalists uncover that the lead doctor who publicly mocked Danielle had previously blocked a promising herbal research grant. Anonymous whistleblowers confirm he ignored patient alternatives out of pride and fear of being wrong. He's suspended. Days later, fired. Harvard Medical School releases a carefully worded statement that includes the line, "We honor the contributions of traditional healing practices and acknowledge the oversight." A package arrives for Danielle, a crimson leather folder, embossed with the university's seal. Inside, an honorary recognition. 3 days later, in a high-rise Manhattan boardroom, Victor's adult children sit stiffly, dressed in couture grief. Their lawyers are tense. They expected to intimidate her, to remind her where she came from. But Danielle enters the room not in a power suit, but in scrubs. The same blue nurse's scrubs they once rolled their eyes at. She doesn't sit. She stands at the head of the table, hands clasped, calm as a heart monitor beep. You laughed at me. You sued me. And now you want my shares. She tilts her head. Triple the offer, or I walk. Silence. Victor's eldest son, who once called her a nobody in a uniform, clears his throat. That's extreme. Danielle smiles. So is healing a man your doctors left for dead. They fold. By the end of the hour, she walks out owning 60% of Langford Biohealers. And they know, the nurse now runs the empire. She doesn't celebrate with champagne or caviar. She books flights. In 6 months, Danielle launched the Global Healing Centers Initiative. First stops, Kenya, Haiti, New Orleans. In rural Kisumu, she sits in a circle with Luo elders, learning fermented root remedies passed down for generations. In Port-au-Prince, she partners with a young female biochemist to test how vibration therapy interacts with cellular regeneration. In New Orleans, she walks into a crumbling community clinic and writes a check on the spot to renovate it. She blends the spiritual with the scientific, the ancestral with the analytical. Her motto, respect the roots, validate the wisdom. Langford Biohealers reinvents itself, not as a cold pharmaceutical giant, but as a bridge between worlds. Healing becomes both big business and sacred duty. A year later, a black stretch limo pulls up to the same Bronx hospital where her journey nearly ended. The same security guard who once reported her now shuffles nervously toward her with a phone in hand. Miss Danielle, can I get a picture for my wife? She doesn't believe I knew you before. She hugs him. Tell her you were the first to witness the beginning. Inside, nurses line the hallways. Young residents gossip and nudge each other. Danielle walks to the administrator's office and hands over a check, $10 million. But, she says, only if you build a unit that trains doctors to respect ancestral medicine. They nod eagerly. And name it after my grandmother, Mama Grace. She was the original healer. At the Global Summit on Integrative Medicine, she sits on a panel with Nobel Prize winners, biotech CEOs, and ministers of health. A young reporter, nervous, bright-eyed, raises a hand. Miss Danielle, after everything, what's the biggest lesson from all this? She doesn't rush her answer. She looks out at the crowd, thousands watching, millions more live streaming. Then, she smiles. They laughed at me for believing in something old. They mocked me for trying to heal with love. Now they're licensing my formula at $10,000 a dose. The crowd erupts. And somewhere, in her hometown, a grandmother's spirit smiles.